President Trump's kicking button, taking names as he turbocharges America into the golden age. At any moment, 47 will be making a massive infrastructure announcement at the White House, an AI project named Stargate. President Trump hitting the ground running as he ruthlessly wipes away the stench of Joe Biden's awful record. So far, he's purged over 1,000 Biden appointees.
Decision of 78 Biden-era executive actions, executive orders, presidential memoranda, and others. A requirement that federal workers return to full-time in-person work immediately. The withdrawal from the Paris Climate Treaty.
The guy's also on an executive order rampage, Roman Coliseum style. MAGA fans roared at the Capital One Arena as Trump sat at a desk on stage, pen in hand, churning out orders on gender, DEI, the TikTok ban, and ditching the Paris Climate Accord. And he was loving every second of it, tossing pens into the crowd like he was launching T-shirts from a cannon. The liberal media just can't handle this much winning.
He has decided to make good on his promise to be a dictator on day one.
There'll be a lawsuit over birthright citizenship. There'll be a lawsuit over suspending asylum. You know, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
There were a lot of big lies there.
Been president for a grand total of 11 hours, and he wasted no time imposing his will on American government.
I was prepared for shock and awe. This is just shock and awful.
The executive orders on DEI in prisons, migrant shelters, as well as in spaces like rape shelters, that could mean that people that are transgender could be moved out of those spaces.
All right, Judge Ginny, we did a little research. I was expecting people to laugh when I said that. And the amount of executive orders on day one for Biden or Obama, there's a couple. I mean, this is testament to how well he was prepared going in.
Well, first of all, when you listen to those left-wing progressive, hosts and talking heads, do they not understand what happened on November 5th? Do they not understand that everything the president was talking about as he signed those executive orders were promises that he made during the campaign, that he said he would do and that he is in the process of delivering? Do they not understand how unprecedented this country is in terms of, the border disaster, in terms of the lack of law and order, what it needs to get this country back on track? I mean, Joe Biden was probably, to me, one of the worst presidents in history. He allowed an invasion of the border. They shut us up for 2 years by saying, we are people, we're xenophobes. We don't want other people coming into this country. Therefore, don't say it's an invasion. It's exactly what it was. They were unvetted. They came in. They committed crimes. We're not allowed to keep numbers on them because secretaries of state and other state officials will not give us that information. And now what you've got are these people saying it's terrible. And Jay Johnson saying if it's not broke, don't fix it. Is the border not broke? Is law and order not broke in this country? And finally, let me just say, I love a president who can go from church in the morning to all kinds of ceremonies and inauguration, and then go to the arena, sign these orders, and then go to every ball and, be out there and be responsive to the press and invite them into the Oval Office. It's like, this is my home. Come on in. I'm signing laws for you. They're crazy on the left.
Speaking of, Jessica, we'll go to you next. What is your favorite, if you had to pick one, executive order?
My favorite as a Democrat or my favorite as an American?
I don't see why you should differentiate.
Well, because there is some partisanship going on in all of this. And
so
there are
you
points
admit that some partisanship is un-American?
I think to some degree, of course. I think
Thank you.
There is some consensus to be had in this. And, like the back to work policy, that will penalize some people that I think have legitimate reason to need to work from home. And hopefully they'll be able to make their case, whether that's taking care of a loved one. They maybe have moved during the pandemic and are still doing their job effectively. But I think it's a good thing that people are in their office. I think that makes sense.
It's a good pick.
I think some of the DEI programs went too far, and everyone has accepted that in the public and the private sector, right? You have a huge surge of roles in companies, large and small, after the murder of George Floyd, and a lot of them have just quietly gotten rid of them even before it was clear that Donald Trump was going to win again. So I think that we can talk about things like that. I think you can even talk about the EV mandate. All of the automakers who share the same aspirations and goals as former President Biden have said we're not going to make our targets. So obviously we need to reassess that to some degree. But when the judge says, this is what the people voted for, some of it they absolutely did not. And Donald Trump promised that he would bring your costs down right away. And he revoked Biden's policy to lower prescription drug prices or to make it so Medicare can't negotiate itself for prescription drug prices. That's not cool.
What
Where is
executive
that?
order
Where
was
is that?
It's look in the list.
Well, show me.
Well, what do you mean?
There's a lot more to that issue, but
Yeah.
Okay. Did the American people on November 5th vote for 1,660 Afghans who are being resettled here, have gone through the government process, people who helped us during the war in Afghanistan, which is translators, risking their lives, people who are on target lists for the Taliban, they had their flights canceled.
The answer is yes, they did vote for it.
No, they didn't.
Yes, they
didn't.
did.
If you sat there.
Yes, they did.
No, they
Sorry,
didn't.
Trump did not hide any of this from
That's not
anyone.
true.
And that's the difference.
You guys sat here and you argued that the Afghanistan withdrawal was one of the worst atrocities in foreign policy, that we left people behind, not only American service members and Americans who are still living, the American service members who passed away tragically and the ones who are still living, but the people that helped us for years during that war. And now you say, it's fine that their flights are just canceled?
No, I didn't say it's fine. I'm saying that Americans voted for it. That's the difference. I don't have to say it's fine. I'm just telling you the reality.
Did you vote to revoke birthright citizenship for the children of people who are here legally?
Do you understand what that means?
Yeah, I do.
Tell me about it. Tell me what birthright citizenship meant.
Well, I think when Donald Trump was talking about it and disparaging people who are here, he was talking about undocumented people who come and drop their anchor babies. He wasn't talking about people who are here on student visas, people who are here on H-1B visas.
You're always going to choose this weird exception.
No,
the fact is the
it's
system
not
is being
weird.
gamed. Americans voted for Donald Trump because they saw these systems, these institutions being gamed. The asylum issue, the birthright citizen issue, Title IX issues. Every single part of society was being gamed by the left. And finally, Americans got pushed too far. The point is, you don't have to like everything in the restaurant to like the restaurant. There are things, I go to a restaurant, I don't eat any seafood, but I like that restaurant because it's got steak. There are things that Trump will do that I will disagree with, but the entire package is as close as you're going to get to what Americans want. Trump is redefining basically what a human being can do in 24 hours. It's incredible. He did more in a day than Biden did in his damn career, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting. He had 3 balls last night. That's 3 more than Adam Kinzinger. The guy hasn't slept in 2 days. I mean, the thing is, it's amazing. It's possible. It is possible. Donald Trump could complete his presidency in 3 months. Right. And then he could just say, you know what?
Is that a promise?
I'm going to coast.
He goes, you know what, JD, you take it from here. I think I did everything I could do. It's incredible. And by the way, you brought up, and you said it was a good thing, the fact that like these people have to go back to work, but then you mentioned all these challenges they have. Well, welcome to America. Every single one of us has a challenge, but yet we come to work. I'm not going to pay for their porn addiction. If they want to sit home in front of Pornhub and go, I have chronic fatigue syndrome, you know what? Everybody in America could stay home because they have a sick loved one or a baby, but they aren't. They're coming to work. They should go. I'm glad that he got rid of the appointees. I need work around the house. I pay well.
Thanks, hiring.
But I'm not done.
Okay.
I'm not done. I got to bring up the Nazi hoax thing because we all know this is BS. And yet the media is redefining losing every single day. Day one, they say Elon Musk made a Nazi salute. Right. And I'm beginning to think, they know they're lying. So why are they doing this? Because they realize they cannot rebuild their credibility. They're like a fat guy on death row. What's the point in dieting? You're already dead.
Looking forward to that last meal. Dana Perino, your thoughts?
I just add a couple of things. So one of the things President Trump was doing was not creating new policy. He was getting rid of policies that Biden had put in place that people said they didn't want. And the ending DEI was 70%, so they supported that. Ending the EV mandates, that was 70%. Finishing the border wall and deportation, 70%. Now, they might not have gotten there without Joe Biden's broken border policy. That might have been a lower number, but that's where they were on Election Day. Getting men out of women's sports, that was like an 80-20 issue, maybe even more. And so it wasn't so much that there was like, oh, here's a brand new policy. It was like, here's all these things that you said, America, you did not like for the last 4 years, and how I'm going to be able to make it better.
All right. Like Greg said, you don't have to like everything on the restaurant menu. You just have to like a few things, and you'll patronize the place day after day.
I will not spend my money there.
Kellyanne, you know, I thought this was interesting, this piece by Walter Russell Mead in the Wall Street Journal talking about American exceptionalism returning. And he says his remarkable political recovery demonstrates the enduring strength of American cultural forces that have for more than 2 centuries made America uniquely hospitable to the disruption and chaos that dynamic capitalism inevitably brings. And I know David Asman's going to love that that concept. But Kellyanne, let me get your thoughts on that and your reaction as we see a lot of action already.
Martha, nice to be with David and you. Thank you. Sure. Day one already feels like dog years. That's the Trump speed. Everything goes very quickly in all dimensions. But that's what Americans voted for and expect. As for this American exceptionalism, this is important because for years that really undergirded the center-right political movement in this nation. Whether you are a foreign policy, national security, Republican or a fiscal, social conservative, you felt that America was not just another country on the map. It is an exceptional place. And we have had presidents and other elected officials who have sort of dismissed, if not denigrated, and denied that. Now with President Trump, even in his speech yesterday, I want to be known my legacy as a unifier, a peacemaker. I thought his speech was also very aspirational, very optimistic, forward-looking, unleashing a golden age. Sure, he looks backwards a little bit, airs his grievances, who doesn't? But at the same time, he is aligned with this op-ed in this way. The op-ed says that it is Americans' sort of sturdiness that can overcome the natural chaos that comes from a dynamic system of capitalism and democracy. Why is that important? Because when it comes to Trump, so many people say, well, he creates the chaos, he creates the disruption. That op-ed makes clear it's already in the system. It's how you deal with that that matters. And I think him taking quick action on any number of issues and people applauding because they understand what the Paris Climate Accords are. They understand what deregulation is. They understand what the Tax Cut and Jobs Act meant for individuals and entities and small businesses across the country. They understand what it means to have the hostage families there from the Middle East. So it's not just that people are applauding him blindly and loyal to him. They're loyal to a set of principles. He beat the prosecutors, the persecutors. He won the policy prescription debate. And now he has the political trifecta of Washington, House, Senate, White House. Got to take advantage of that.
That's exactly, that's exactly what he's working on right now with Thune and Johnson. Let me get you in here, David. You know, starting with Doge. And I think, you know, it has to be recognized the influence that Musk has had on cutting spending. Yes. And I think that was in many ways the initial sort of exchange for Musk's support was that there would be this Department of Government Efficiency, David. And we've already seen it shrinking federal government, a hiring freeze going into effect, and the elimination of federal DEI agency workers. They will be gone. And guess what? Federal workers have to return to the office 5 days a week.
Surprise, surprise. You have to be there to get something done. Yep. Productivity. And I would just build on what Kellyanne would say. It's a difference between reality and fantasy. The world in which the Biden policies were constructed was a fantasy world, whether you were talking about the border, which we all knew was open and they claim was closed, whether you were talking with the economy, green energy programs that didn't work, that they were spending billions of dollars on, a CHIPS Act in which they were spending billions of dollars in corporate welfare going to companies like Intel, which did worse after they received the money. It's why President Trump was talking about common sense, what works and what doesn't work. And it's not a coincidence that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are two very successful business people. If you go into business with the fantasy, you may win short term and fool some people, but eventually the reality catches up with you and you end up with a losing business. The same is true with public policy. We have had 4 years of policy built on fantasy, not on the real world, but on the imagined world of a lot of these liberal policymakers, and the stuff didn't work. Crime is another example. You go on and on and on. Foreign policy, all of these. Remember that foreign policy expert from the State Department who said the Middle East has never been more peaceful now? That was a week before October 7th. They just have this fantasy notion of what to do with policy that doesn't work. Elon Musk, Donald Trump has spent their lifetime working with reality and making things work in reality.
Yeah, they know how to cut costs because that's what you have to do when you run a business. You know, I'm curious what your thoughts are, Kellyanne, in terms of what this big announcement might be that we're expecting to get in a short time. There was some discussion that it may be about unused funds from the Inflation Reduction Act or even COVID funds that were designated for infrastructure. What's your hunch?
Sure. So the Inflation Reduction Act passed on a completely partisan vote. This is important, Martha, because it was an Inflation Reduction Act at all. In fact, the special green envoy, John Kerry, said this is really a climate bill. It's a green bill. And when you take a look at the facts undergirding the Inflation Reduction Act, it gutted Medicare by $237 billion, and that went to migrant care, that went to these climate change, compliance, green stuff, in addition to all the other things that were called infrastructure, EV charges, 500,000 of them. 8 had been built by October and November. So President Trump is going to get in there and do a couple things. Number one, get us back to where we were with him. But number two, they broke it, I fixed it. They ignored it, I'll tackle it. On this, on infrastructure, on AI, on unspent funds, he can say this is another kind of waste. They said they spent all this money on XYZ. It's still sitting there. We're not going to put it there. We're going to put it ABC, which is what you voted for. Also, if the president tackles AI and even crypto early on, he's showing a recognition of what has evolved since he left the White House 4 years ago. These are two areas, and I've discussed this with him directly, these are two areas that have just exploded. They certainly existed in 2020 and 2019, but they've just exploded, and he recognizes that by having some true crypto and AI experts around him. AI needs to be seen as a force for good. We don't want the Trump voters to think their jobs will go away because of AI and robotics. It's quite the opposite in some of these fields. So I'm glad he's tackling that early on and level setting expectations.
Can I just say one thing about
Sure.
AI, which is that it needs a lot of energy to work. And that's why they're creating all these new data centers, et cetera. And you're not going to get it from windmills. I'm sorry, but you're just not. You have to focus on energy, the energy that we have in the United States that produces enough energy for all these magnificent new things that we're going to be able to take advantage of. That's why his energy component is so key to the whole plan, and why, frankly, the windmill program of the past administration, on which they wasted literally more than $100 billion, was frankly just a lot of waste of money. That's why the clawback would be so great if what Kellyanne says happens.
And this is why when I see the tech giants at the inauguration, I see them as a team to make sure that we lead in AI, as people who understand how to harness it, and what we all need to understand and know to dominate in it, because we have to dominate in AI. We can't allow China to take that role.
Well, first, President Trump is off to a very strong and a very fast start. I thought that the speech yesterday was so uplifting, outstanding, optimistic. It's what we want to hear as Americans, that the golden age of our country, of America, begins right now. That's what people wanted to hear. That's what people, Dana, in our home state of Wyoming, were looking for, and I've been hearing from them throughout the day. The executive orders were critical on the energy, on the environment, on the economy, on the border. All of those things are so critical for our country, for the safety and the prosperity of America. And last night, we were able to confirm Marco Rubio and then pass bipartisan legislation, the Laken Riley Act, about a young 22-year-old nursing student who was out for a jog, murdered by an illegal immigrant. So yeah, the work continues today. We're going to be meeting, I am, along with Senate leadership and House leadership, with the president at the Oval Office. My job from the president is to get that cabinet confirmed as a majority whip in the Senate, get those people in place. That's what he has asked me and all of us to get done. And then I'm sure the president is going to talk about the agenda for getting America back on track. That's what the American people voted for. That's what they want.
You mentioned the Laken Riley Act. It was passed last night in the Senate. 12 Democrats joined Republicans in getting that over the line, and that is now the law of the land once the president signs it with his own pen at the White House. Part of this law, Senator, mandates the federal detention of immigrants without legal status accused of theft and burglary, among other things. What does that do to sanctuary city laws in America? Does that supersede that? Do they collide? What happens there?
Well, we'll see how people live in those sanctuary cities, how they behave in terms of the legal actions by the police officers, because that's what happened in the case of Laken Riley. Her murderer was in the country illegally, and he was a criminal. He had been accused and found having shoplifting, other crimes against individuals. Bill, 87% of Americans say people like that, people who are in the country illegally, who are criminals, need to be deported. That's what the American people want. So if you have some woke, liberal leadership in a sanctuary city acting otherwise, it's time for them to lose elections the next time they're at the ballot box. The president, I believe, has a mandate. 87% of the people agree. Those folks illegally in this country, criminals, need to be rounded up, deported, or in jail, one or the other, but they should not be on our streets threatening our communities. People want a secure border. They want safe communities. They want to be able to live in safety, and that's what this administration is going to deliver.
Well, he's taken a number of actions, and I'm glad he's acting decisively. You know, in his first term, he said to me about the drug war that a lot of people have just kicked the can down the road, and he really feels he was elected to office to tackle problems head on, and that's what he's doing. On the cartels, the designation of them as a terror group is an important step. It allows us to impose sanctions on individuals, impose additional sanctions beyond those we've already imposed. But at the end of the day, I think the real question is not so much designating them, but how we're going to treat them. And I think we have to start treating them and responding to them the way we would a group like ISIS. And I think that's in the cards eventually.
I mean, that's something that you and I talked about when you were Attorney General, and now there is this opportunity with President Trump back in. What do you think it looks like? And, you know, I feel that this part, the cartel part of the conversation often gets lost in, you know, we show these images, truthfully, of people crossing the border. But this is a business that is bigger than the drug business now for the cartels. And the drug business is bad enough with the fentanyl traffic that crosses our border.
Well, right. Well, step one, I think, as the president recognizes, is sealing the border, getting control over that border. Because these groups are responsible for the migration, as you say, that's big business for them, human trafficking, and the drugs that come across the border as well. And all their organized criminal activity and gangs that are coming across and setting up outposts in the United States. We have to get control of the border, and he'll do that with his Remain in Mexico policy, building the wall and putting more resources along the border. After that, we have to focus, and I think he will, on the cartels and China, because two countries are responsible for 90% of the drugs, the deadly drugs that come into this country, and that's China and or Mexico. China produces the fentanyl and the fentanyl precursors. They're aware that their companies are producing this and selling it to the Mexicans. They can stop it if they want to. The Mexicans have no ability to control the cartels. They're essentially co-opted, and they're either intimidated or they're bought and paid for. And so we have to push the Mexicans to allow us to work with them to deal with the cartels. They can't by themselves get out from the death grip of the cartels. They need our help, and we're going to have to make it clear to them that the current situation is intolerable, and they're either going to be with us or against us. And I think they will have no choice. I think the tariffs that the president has talked about, 25% on Mexico and an additional 10% on China, are going to be extremely important in breaking the back of the drug trade.
Absolutely. And so do you see a scenario where we get an agreement with Mexico where we would send special forces in to go after the cartels and take them out, take out members of the cartels to send a very strong message?
Yes, I think eventually the Mexicans are going to have to agree to work with us. I think their government and their agencies are so corrupt and corruptible by the cartels, both because of intimidation, of terrorism tactics, but also because they have vast amounts of money to bribe people, that it's very hard to maintain operational security down there. So they're going to have to give us some running room and start working with us and allow us to train and vet units down there. They can't do it by themselves. And so I think once they understand that the United States is not going to continue to stand by and permit this kind of catastrophic harm to our own country to continue, they will understand they have no choice. Furthermore, the tariffs, I think, can drive their economy into the ground, and I don't think they can afford to let that happen.
Yeah, I mean, we have had our own forces and special ops forces on the ground there in the past, decades ago. Not unprecedented, as we heard the president say on the way in here. Quick question on this birthright citizenship reversal that President Trump wants to do. Where do you stand on the subject of the 14th Amendment and whether or not it dictates that anyone who is born here is a citizen? Do you see it that way, or do you see the subject to the jurisdiction thereof clause in the 14th Amendment as something that leaves some room for change there?
I think that the president is right as to what the right policy is. It's ridiculous to have birthright citizenship. Now, this language that was adopted, in the 1800s is a little bit opaque. It says subject to the someone born in the U.S. and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Most legal scholars would say that all that means is they're not the children of diplomats, they're not the children of foreign soldiers who are encamped in the United States. But I think there's a plausible argument to be made that it means allegiance. However, it's going to take a lot. It's an uphill battle because there's a lot of precedent over the last 150 years, in practice more than precedent, actually. And I think the courts are going to be potentially reluctant to change that in the face just of an executive order. But I think it's worth starting the battle. I think once the people understand the arguments, they'll be supportive of what the president's trying to accomplish. If it can't be done by executive order, we should move by statute, where I think there's a good argument to be made that Congress would have more latitude in this because of the Section 5 of the 14th Amendment that gives them power to enforce the 14th Amendment. And if we have to amend the Constitution. But I think this is a debate worth having.
It's a huge, huge issue coming down the pike, and we'll see where it goes. Thanks for showing us, the background around that law.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.